Welcome back to Wellness Photos, and this is where we talk about cycling. And the Tour de France is happening at the moment, and this whole disc brake thing and the pros is really not gone off the ball, and we've had a number of incidents with the disc brakes. Now, we even have people like Lance Armstrong and George Hincapie, weigh in on why these people are having problems with their disc brakes, and they're saying that, yeah, they got the bikes not long before and they're getting used to them. But really, this is not the beginning of the season, and they have training camps, they have everything. And even if they're given these bikes earlier, this is not the first time they've ridden, hydraulic disc brakes, and they do an insane amount of kilometres on these bikes, and they're all dialed in by the mechanics, and everything is set so the rider's happy with the equipment he's using, and that's why they actually have specific bikes on their vehicles for the specific riders. So the whole thing that they're not used to, the feel and the modulation, is a bit of a stretch. And you got to remember that these guys are the best bike handlers in the world currently at the moment. That's why they're riding the Tour de France. So I don't believe that's really the reason. Now, we're going to roll that intro, and then we're going to have a bit of a deep dive into what could really be happening on these bikes and these disc brakes, and why the pros are having problems with them. Well, I believe that it has to do with compliance and maintaining the contact of the tyre onto the surface of the road. Now, when we look at a bicycle, the main two parts that give us a compliance are the frame, which is the fork at the front, and also the rear triangle, and the actual wheels and the spokes. And these things are designed to not be super rigid. They're designed to have some sort of vertical compliance. Now, the reason why that is because any vehicle that's on the road, could be a vehicle or a car like, has to be able to keep the tyres in contact with the road, right, when they're going over undulating surfaces. Now, of course, if you're going off-road where the undulations are bigger, then your suspension has to be more significant. But for a road-type environment, these sorts of things, like for a bicycle, can be built into the frame. And it's the same even with go-karts. People may not realise, even though they're a rigid chassis, they actually tweak them and balance them, so they actually do have some flex, especially in the drive part of the vehicle at the back. So compliance is something that is used in vehicles to keep the tyres in contact with the ground. Now, when we look at a rim brake bike compared to a disc brake bike, what we're actually doing is we're actually mounting the actual caliper on parts of the bike that are normally used for compliance. With a rim brake bike, we're not. We're mounting them on the main triangle of the frame, the rigid part of the frame. Now, what this does is it actually makes some of the force be applied to the end of the bicycle forks and the rear triangle. So some of that compliance is actually being used under braking by the actual brakes themselves on a disc brake bike. So what we're doing there is we're actually limiting the amount of compliance that we would have on the disc brake bike. Now, let's actually switch over to wheels. Now, when we look at wheels, right, the spokes actually have some flex in them. As you go along and you actually lean the bike over, those wheels actually do have some flex in them. And what this does is it keeps the actual tyre in contact with the ground. Now, with a disc brake bike, what it does is it uses the spokes to transfer the braking force through the spokes to the rim to actually slow the bike down. Now, this creates all sorts of problems because, one, we're actually now loading up the spokes, right? Again, like we're loading up the frame of the bicycle. And even worse, because we normally have a lot of wheels that are designed with some radial spokes and some cross-spoking, like the fulcrum wheels, which have the 21 spokes, and we have 7 in radial and 14 in cross-spoking, same with the G3 design on the Campagnolio, we're only having effectively 2/3 of the spokes that are transferring the load to the actual tyre that's in contact with the ground. Now, all of these things actually might not be able to be felt when you're just riding along normally, but when you're on the limit, this could actually have that less amount of compliance that the pros are expecting on the limit that they're not getting from the disc brake bike. So what's actually happening is the actual wheel is actually losing contact with the ground, and then we're getting this locking of the wheel effect, especially on the back wheel. And this is why I reckon that they're having problems, because even though they may have more modulation, because, I mean, disc brakes in theory do, because of the way that they're designed, you need more pressure because you're on a smaller disc than a rim brake. You in theory do have more modulation. The problem is when they're getting to braking limit, the actual compliance of the frame and the compliance of the wheels are not giving you that same edge or kind of area that you would have on a rim brake bike. It's much smaller to when the wheel's going to let go. And I think they're having trouble finding this spot. Now, you might go, well, you know, these guys are the best, but that's the thing, they are the best. And if they can't ride at the limit with these disc brake bikes, then how are like lesser models like us supposed to do it? So even though people may think that these disc brakes actually have more power, which I suppose they do because they're hydraulically assisted, that you use less force, so there's hydraulic assistance there to give you more power. But the reality is the power can't make you stop quicker, and I've spoke about this in other videos that I've made. So are we really getting more modulation? And it looks like we're not. The pros really can't feel the actual braking point of the tyre on the bike, so they're actually going that little bit extra, and the wheel's locking. And then, of course, once you have a skidding wheel, you lose line, you lose speed. You're actually not taking the fastest line around the corner. So that's what I believe is going on here. And I just wanted to make this short video to respond to, you know, Lance Armstrong and George Hincapie, and also we have Harley Johnston, you know, weighing in on this, and he wants, you know, disc brakes banned. So it's a conversation that's very current, and I think a conversation we should have, because it's not an isolated incident. We've had people locking these brakes up in the wet, and we've also had people locking these brakes up in the dry. Well, anyway, guys, that's my opinion on it, and I'm coming at it from a design engineering type of view. If anyone's got any other ideas about why they think the pros are having problems with these disc brake bikes, leave it down below. But I do think that this is the real issue. It's a compliance issue.